Community Church, and especially Shine Kids, Happy New Year! I feel like we can still say that even the second week of January, right? Happy New Year! And speaking of the second week in January, that means it's Shine Spotlight. So if you have kids and they are not here, then go get them now so that we can all do our Shine Spotlight together. And I'm talking really slow so you have time to get them and gather around. Right, okay, here we are. I was thinking, we are in the middle of a series called Generous Love. I don't know if you knew that, but it got me to thinking about generous love. Okay, especially God's generous love. What is that? Like, does God's love ever stop? How big is God's love really? So I thought, well, what better place to go for answers than the Bible? So I went to the Bible, and sure enough, Paul, the Apostle Paul, in his letter to the church in Ephesus, in Ephesians, prays for God's people that they would understand the length and width and height and depth of the love of Christ. And I thought, okay, well, if Paul is praying that we would understand the length and height and width and depth of God's love, why don't I just go ahead and measure it so I know how God's love is really? With me? You want to do it with me? Should we measure God's love? Okay, great. Let's see. Okay, here. I've got my measuring tape. So, how can I measure God's love? Where should I begin? Ooh, I know. How about a person? I mean, a couple weeks ago, Pastor Brenda and I talked about how we're made in the image of God. So, if God is love, then and a person is made in the image of God, then a person should be loved. So I can measure a person and to see how big God's love is. Let's see who I can find. Hey, Anita, can I measure you?
Sure, but can I ask why?
Well, yeah, sure, because I'm measuring God's love. So I figure you're a person, and as a person, you're made in the image of God.
Yeah.
So if I measure you, then I can see how big God's love is.
I like your thinking, but Marilee, God's love is much bigger than I am.
Oh, really? I guess you're right. Well, then how am I supposed to measure how big God's love is?
Well, there is this song, and it goes like this. Here is love, vast as the ocean. So, maybe you could start with the ocean? Try and measure the ocean.
Oh, I like it. Yeah, the ocean's pretty vast, big, as you say. Okay, well, thanks, Anita. I'm going to go measure the ocean. Thank you. Bye. Well, here we are. I mean, we're not at a beach because those are closed, but we're at the harbor, which leads to the ocean. So let me just go ahead and see if I can measure that. Let's try it. Let's see. I got my... Well, that didn't work. Forget it. I'm going in. You ready for this? Take my shoes off. All right. Here we go. what to do. How am I gonna measure God's love? Wait a second. I remember. There is another verse in Psalms 37, I believe, that says, your love, O Lord, reaches to the heavens. What if I try to get up to the heavens to measure it? To the heavens. Well, guys, I think that's just it. I'm starting to realize you can't measure God's love. It's just too big and too long and, well, too immeasurable. He loves you when you're good. He loves you when you're bad. He just loves you. And that is generous love.